Hello, everyone, and welcome. Happy Earth Day. My name is Betty Cruz, and I'm the president and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Pittsburgh. Our mission is to convene and connect people around global issues to build a thriving, competitive, and inclusive Pittsburgh. And our vision is for a globally minded and globally connected world that is equitable and just for all. 2021 marks the Council's 90th birthday. Please join us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter to learn about the ways we will be celebrating later this year. Today's program is the kickoff to our Resiliency series. This series will explore how local, national, and international governments, institutions, and individuals are working to increase resiliency as it relates to the economy, health, and climate action, areas that are often, if not always, interconnected. In addition to kicking off our Resiliency series, today's program is also in recognition of Earth Day. And it's worth noting that the White House is currently hosting a virtual climate summit with 40 world leaders. While more announcements are expected throughout the day, President Biden has already committed the US to cutting emission in half by 2030. We also want to take a moment to thank our co-hosts for this event, the World Affairs Council of America and the Center for Sustainable Business at the University of Pittsburgh, where I proudly serve on the Center's Strategic Advisory Council alongside our featured speaker, Dr. Jeffery Sachs. We are thrilled to welcome Dr. Sachs as today's keynote. Dr. Sachs is a world-renowned economics professor, best-selling author, innovative educator, and global leader in sustainable development. Dr. Sachs serves as the director of the Center for Sustainable Development at Columbia University and as president of the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network. Following his remarks, we will open the floor to questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen if you are joining on Zoom. Feel free to use the chat feature if you're more comfortable with that. And also, for those of you joining on Facebook Live, you can submit your questions in the comments. At noon, we will move to the second half of the program, a moderated panel discussion with Divya Navle and CB Bhattacharya on their views regarding climate innovation, and we will again have space for questions from the audience. Without further delay, Dr. Sachs, please take it away.
Thanks a lot, Betty, and happy birthday to the World Affairs Council of Pittsburgh, and thank you for hosting this. Thank you for the Center for Sustainable Business at University of Pittsburgh and our colleague CB Bhattacharya for all of your leadership. It is indeed a timely day to have this discussion. We have the major seminar of the day, and the White House has a satellite seminar getting world leaders to sign up to the net zero goal. And there's been a lot of progress already this morning with many world leaders that have not really been on this case up until now, like President Bolsonaro of Brazil, pledging Brazil's commitment to the net zero goal. President Putin made strong statements about the centrality of climate. President Xi Jinping of China announced that China will start a significant phase down of coal in 2025, meaning that China will essentially have peak emissions well before 2030. And of course, China has also committed to reach net zero by 2060. And I think it will happen sooner than that. And then we have the United States' strong goals of, reaching net zero by 2050, and now the interim goal of 2030 of cutting emissions by half. So something's changing. The main change is we have some national leadership which is sane in this country, which is committed to the right things. We lived through a nightmare with Trump, multiple nightmares. It shows how our country is so vulnerable to really devastatingly dangerous direction. And we were on the wrong course for many years, out of the Paris Agreement, championing every kind of fossil fuel project imaginable, wasting time and money absolutely in a dangerous direction. The American people did not want this. This was political lobbying of the oil industry and the coal industry Trump thought it was a vote winner, but the American people, thank God, understood we need sane leadership and we need to move forward, not backward into some fantasy world. And the American people strongly support climate action. Sorry if my words are a little bit harsh. They're not actually partisan, but the last 4 years were a nightmare in terms of global cooperation, sanity, and facing up to major crises, whether it's the climate change crisis or even a pandemic striking us and taking more than 560,000 American lives. Even then, we couldn't get a response from the Trump administration. Well, why net zero? I think we all understand that net zero by 2050 is the milestone that's needed and the timeline that's needed to have a fighting chance to stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius warming of Earth compared to the pre-industrial level. Why 1.5 degrees C as our final guardrail maximum? Because there will be huge disasters and dislocations even at 1.5 degrees C, but there are many risks of tremendous tipping points and major feedbacks in the Earth's systems. The slowing or stopping of the ocean circulation, the release of massive amounts of greenhouse gases from the permafrost or the ocean, the disintegration of part of the West Antarctic ice sheet, leading to a multi-meter rise of sea level. This is the real deal. We're in the midst of a profound crisis that the lobbying of the oil industry has hidden from stopped action for so long. And now finally, I think there is a realization, with 2020 again being the hottest year on instrument record, tied with 2016. But 2016 was an El Nino year, which means hotter than usual. 2020 tied for the record, even being a La Nina year, which means cooler than underlying trend. In other words, the planet is warming very, very fast. We don't hear from climate denialists anymore because that was also bunkum and very dangerous and funded by Koch brothers or Exxon and others for years and years. And it was really dangerous and pernicious false information. And I think we're also beyond that. So the world is moving to net zero. We really need to move fast because we lost decades. Earth is already 1.2 degrees Celsius warmer than the pre-industrial. We are the warmest of the last 10,000 years. We are the warmest of any time of human civilization. We're in a massive danger zone already. Temperatures are warming by 0.2 to 0.3 degrees Celsius per decade right now. We could easily breach the 1.5 degree limit, and in a bad El Nino year, that could happen within a decade. We could overshoot that 1.5 degrees C, but then be even more urgent that we stop the emissions, even move to negative net emissions in the second half of this century through essentially recapturing carbon in natural systems, so that if we do overshoot, we're able to bring the Earth's temperature back below this 1.5 degrees. In fact, my colleague, James Hansen, who I regard as the world's greatest climate scientist, says we need to get back to 1 degree C maximum warming, which of course we already have exceeded. How are we going to do this? Technically, the path is actually pretty well understood. And most of what we need in technology is already at hand, though it will continue to improve. What do we need? We need zero carbon power. zero carbon electricity, wind, solar, hydro, as the core of the energy system. Thank God the United States is hugely blessed with these renewable energy sources, as we are with so many other things. And so we can develop zero carbon power. Then we need to electrify everything that we can electrify. First, of course, vehicles. We're going to be in a world of electric vehicles very, very soon. The major companies are basically not going to produce internal combustion engines after 2030 would be my estimate, or at very small amounts. Then we need to electrify our buildings. Heating in the United States will go from heating oil and natural gas to heat pumps and electrification. A tremendous proportion of the cooking will go to electric-based cooking. A lot of industry will go to electricity for industrial processing and heat. And for those areas in industry that cannot be served directly by electrification, we're going to need a bypass operation, in effect, of using the clean power to produce green fuels, especially hydrogen. Looks to be the most promising for metallurgy and for other parts of heavy industry. So we will either directly electrify industry, or we will move to hydrogen or synthetic green methane or green ammonia. That means produced with clean power. All of this means that the basic pathways are known to reach 80% decarbonization. There are hard sectors that remain, puzzles with good ideas, with template technologies, but with uncertainties. Aviation is a good case of that. Maybe long-haul civil aviation will be flying on advanced biofuels or on synthetic fuels. Maybe short-haul aviation will be electric, actually, for flights under 1 hour. Ocean shipping is another example where there are debates about the technology pathway. Will it be hydrogen combustion, hydrogen fuel cells, synthetic fuels? But basically, for ocean shipping and aviation, there are puzzles. And there are definitely puzzles for other parts of industry, for cement, materials processing, petrochemicals, obviously, metallurgy. Exactly which pathway will be what innovation is about. It's notable that President Biden's infrastructure plan calls for a significant increase of R&D spending in these areas. And we need that, not because we lack solutions, but because these solutions will be improved tremendously through R&D and learning by doing in the coming years. And a lot of the improvements will be public-private partnerships of the steel industry with the US government, with universities and so forth, working on best solutions. The pathways for all of this, I think, are sufficiently well understood that I am optimistic that we're going to meet our benchmarks. And it's a reason why governments are coming online to say, yes, zero by 2050. So what do we need for success? First, we need global cooperation. The White House meeting today is a good example of global cooperation. We need to stop bickering with China. We need to stop thinking in Cold War terms. We need to stop thinking in us versus them terms. We need to understand the whole world is in this together. Second, we need a major role of the federal government. This will not work without government leadership, because the mobilization of resources that is needed is absolutely vast. Third, we need a major leadership state by state. States will be the ones to implement the zero carbon power generation plans, because utilities are regulated overwhelmingly at the state level. Cities will be redesigning their core infrastructure and their building codes and refitting for electric vehicles and for self-driving vehicles in the very near future. This is an urban responsibility, and our cities are already on the case. And finally, I want to end with the role of the universities, which are crucial players in every aspect of this, in educating leaders who can carry out this major transformation. Of course, in the research agenda, whether it's material science, whether it's renewable energy, whether it's applied technologies, whether it's artificial intelligence and digital technologies for smart grids. In every area, we need both basic scientific research and engineering to continue to improve the technologies. And universities are also great conveners. Just as the World Affairs Council is a great convener, we need lots of citizen participation and deliberation and engagement for what will be an enormous transformation in our society, but one that will not only be the transformation to climate safety, but a transformation to cleaner air, safer environment, and a higher quality of life. So this is not just eating our spinach, to do the right thing. This is actually a transformation for a better life in the United States and around the world, not only to avoid the climate hazards, which are so real, but actually to engage in the new advanced technologies in a way that are going to produce, I think, inclusive and more productive and certainly more sustainable societies everywhere. Today, I'm an optimist, and I think we should put our shoulder to it and get moving. So thank you very much for letting me share a few quick thoughts, and back to you, Betty.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sachs. Thank you for your optimism and for this incredible insight. We have some questions coming in from the audience, and encourage all of you to please submit those. In about the next 10 or so minutes that we have, we want to start the conversation around infrastructure, actually. You recently wrote in an article for CNN about President Biden's infrastructure plan and what you believe should be his primary goals. What do you see as the biggest barrier to President Biden's ability to achieve these goals, and how can he overcome them?
I think the American people are for it. I think actually even a lot of Republicans are for it, though most of them aren't admitting it yet. But part of it is we need to pay for this. And so the administration put some corporate taxes on the public's proposal, and I think there was widespread support for it, but the business sector said, oh, well, we want the good infrastructure, but we don't want to pay for it. But I think Americans are getting the fact that first, we have to pay for what we need. And second, it's time actually for the business sector to pay, because they've gotten breaks and breaks and breaks and breaks for decades. And actually, the businesses need this improved infrastructure for their own competitiveness. And so they ought to be paying for it. And it's interesting, President Biden said that the corporate tax benchmark rate should go up from 21 to 28%. And the business community, at least the formal spokesman, oh, why should we bear the burden? But we should remember that all the president is calling for is restoring half of what the tax was before 2017. So remember, before the unjustified 27 corporate tax cut, the rate was 35%. Then the tax cut took it to an unaffordable 21%. President Biden's calling for restoring it halfway to 28%. And so we should really get behind that proposal. I think that this will get done. And what I see in the opinion polls is that all over the country, there's really broad support for this. Though our political system is polarized, I don't think the American people are anywhere near as polarized as the political system in Washington. So Washington is a kind of artifact of this take no hostages approach to congressional politics and all the primary challenges and pulling the parties to more extreme positions. But the public supports this.
Okay. Thank you for that. First question from the audience here. Recently, the countries surrounding the Caspian Sea signed an agreement to exploit gas and oil in the region. Diplomats of these countries are enthusiastic about the potential for this cooperation to bring peace to these countries who have been in conflict for many years. How does the world deal with the motivation to use gas and oil exploitation as a mechanism to reduce conflict among neighbor states?
You know, in many parts of the world, there are gas and oil projects that are still going forward on the books, people very excited, quick riches. Almost all of this is absolutely wrong. And I don't believe in the end will take place. I was discussing an issue like this about a big project in East Africa, uh, many billions of dollars to develop oil, but that project needs 1,000-mile pipeline through fragile ecosystems to bring oil to the sea in a context where the major countries are saying, okay, we're getting out of oil. We don't want oil. We don't need oil. We're going to drive electric vehicles. Thank you. We're going to heat our homes with electricity. Thank you. So I think there's a lot of unrealism. You know, oil and gas make people crazy. It's the Midas factor. Get rich quick. This is great. I think it's really bogus in most places. And I would say to anybody, don't put your money into this. It's going to get stranded. You're going to lose it. Don't build new pipelines. So I hope the Caspian comes up with some other approaches. The Caspian has a lot of great sunshine. It's got a lot of other great potential. It's got hydropower potential. Do something that's going to last, not something that is going to be fleeting.
Thank you for that, Dr. Sachs. A question from Facebook. There's a controversy regarding biomass power, wooden pellets. Some think this is an environmental solution. Others think this is not good because it requires a lot of cutting of trees. What is your opinion regarding this technology?
In general, biofuels, I think, have a very small role to play. Bio waste can be used in cities as part of recycling and can be an efficient niche. But biofuels as a large part of solution, from what I can see, doesn't work because we need nature for two huge purposes. One, to leave it alone so that we can conserve biodiversity. And second, for our food. And we shouldn't be competing with the arable land for biofuels as we do in Iowa right now to put into the gas tank. All of that should stop. It was a bit of a boondoggle to begin with, or more than one. It was lobbying. It was the return to Iowa of hosting the caucuses every 4 years. So every candidate came and defended what was not a very wise policy. But you don't need ethanol for the gas tank of an electric vehicle because there's no gas tank. So I think that the biofuel role will be very limited and niche, maybe for aviation fuel, not for broad transport or heating or power generation. I don't see much of a role in that.
Okay, we have a few questions around behavioral change, social impact. So things like, I'm gonna combine them, but there's questions around our tendency around consumerism, what needs to shift there, the reality around equity and inclusiveness, and the fact that our most vulnerable communities are most impacted first by climate change. And additionally, What do you say to people who don't believe in science still and don't believe that climate action is real, including representatives in Congress? If you can lump all of that together and
Yeah. A lot of what needs to be done actually isn't going to change behavior too much, because we're still going to have our cars, but they're going to run on electricity. We're still going to have our Zooms and our computers, and they're going to run on electricity. But the electricity is going to be green. And for most of us, we won't know the difference because we barely know where our power supply comes from currently. And we'll still have our power and we'll have our lives, but it will be done with different technologies. So a large part of this particular agenda doesn't require deep behavioral change, because we'll have our homes, they'll be heated. We'll have our electricity, still. We'll have our transport, still. We'll have our industry, but we'll do it in a zero carbon manner. This isn't to say that behavior shouldn't change in many ways. It's just to say that this isn't a profound upheaval of our lives. Now, there will be upheavals of our lives for other reasons, like we've experienced in the last year. Many of us live on Zoom. We didn't think we lived in Zoom land. I thought I lived in New York, but now I live in Zoom land. So this is an upheaval. Will we go to the office in the future? How will our work relate to our daily lives? Will we own automobiles in the future? Probably not. Probably automobiles will be a mobility service. In other words, they'll show up when we need it, probably without a driver, and take us to where we need to go. I think Carnegie Mellon will probably get that going pretty well. So our lives will change, but the decarbonization part is not mainly a lifestyle change. Now, one area where there is a lot to talk about on lifestyle is our industrial food system, because that has two problems. One, it's environmentally unsustainable. And so we're not storing carbon, we're not preserving biodiversity, and so forth. And it's not healthy for us. America is really one giant comorbidity of bad diets right now. And this is an area where I think behavior change does interact with climate much more, and healthier plant-based proteins, grains, legumes, fruits, they have a bigger role to play, both in terms of land use and in terms of what we eat. So that, I think, will change, but that's, again, largely going to change as a health issue, but it will have a positive ecological impact.
Okay, thank you. We're going to close out with one last also mashup. I know you've got to run here, but
and by the way, what do I say to people that don't believe in the climate science? Not very much, because they're really, people are entitled to their rights as long as they don't stop us from saving our planet. And I think we're really past that. There are diehards who are going to hang in there because they don't believe, they are biblical fundamentalists or don't believe in almost much of the science, even though they're users of modern technology, which are basically proofs of all of the science. But there's some people you're not going to win the argument with, but a vast majority of Americans understand this now.
Gotcha. So closing out, combining two questions on big issues here around nuclear and cap and trade. Is there a role for the cap and trade program that now supports the protection, development, and reforestation? And then on nuclear, will new design, small, safe nuclear generating plants be needed to supplement renewable energy sources in order to meet the 2030 goal?
Yeah, very good questions. We need, in many cases, direct financing to protect ecosystems, what's called payment for ecosystem services. So, and that's what President Bolsonaro of Brazil was saying. Okay, we want to protect the Amazon, you help us to do it. I think it's a valid point, actually, and we have similar validity within the United States. I wouldn't link it to cap and trade per se, although that is a mechanism to provide possibly some financing. Cap and trade is a system to get us to decarbonize in other sectors. I don't think we need it actually compared to other tools. It's a long question over time, but basically I like the regulatory approach, which says every state should have a zero carbon power plan. I like the regulatory approach that says we're not going to have internal combustion engine vehicles after a certain date, which looks to be around 2030, maybe 2035. I think that will get us a long way. I'm sympathetic to carbon taxes in certain industrial contexts. Cap and trade is a pretty, it's a heavy system administratively that doesn't deliver very much compared to other simpler tools. So I'm going to just leave it at that. And to say that exactly which policies we use to get to where we need to go is partly a technical debate and partly a political debate. But I think the clarity of saying by such and such date, you just can't do what you're doing right now is the biggest thing. Just like President Xi Jinping said, we're going to get out of coal. That's what we need to decide. No more licenses for coal plants. I think that's obvious in the United States. I think it's now obvious in China as well. And that is going to be kind of the direct path to getting to zero that we need to take.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Sachs, for your time today. I know we're just scratching the surface. We had so many questions, and hopefully we'll bring you back another time.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much. And again, happy birthday to the World Affairs Council of Pittsburgh. That's great. And thanks to all the friends, and see you soon.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Now we're going to move into the second part of our program where we get to have a conversation with our panelists. Following this conversation, we're going to have time for questions as well from the audience. So please add those, keep them coming. It is my pleasure now to introduce Divya Nawale and Professor C.B. Bhattacharya. At 22 years old, Divya Nawale, I'm sorry, Divya, I rehearsed and here we are, but Divya Nawale, at 22 years old, was chosen as a youth environmental champion from India to go on an expedition to Antarctica. Since then, she has engaged in over 50 projects working on issues related to climate change, sustainability, and renewable energy across Asia, Europe, and North America. Having served as a sustainability fellow at the City of Pittsburgh, she has spent the last few years working with the Asian Development Bank on clean energy and energy efficiency. Divya also advises several nonprofits in India on climate awareness for children and youth, focusing on personal carbon footprint management. And Divya is joining us today from India. So good evening to you, Divya. And I'm gonna invite also now Professor C.B. Bhattacharya into the conversation, who is the founder and director of the Center for Sustainable Business and H.J. Zoffer Chair in Sustainability and Ethics at the Joseph M. Katz Graduate School of Business, both at the University of Pittsburgh. He is a distinguished expert in business strategy innovation aimed at increasing both business and social value. Professor Bhattacharya is part of a select group of faculty that has been named twice to Business Week's Outstanding Faculty list and has been recognized by Thomson Reuters and Google Scholar as one of the top cited scholars in his field. Welcome, Professor Bhattacharya. CB, if I may, as we know each other a bit here now, and I'm gonna ask you to unmute yourself. But let's start with you. In an article in the Harvard Business Review, you argued that companies that are winning the sustainability battle have created the conditions for their stakeholders to own sustainability. Can you say more about this? Why is it so important for companies to transform their stakeholders from bystanders into owners?
Thank you, Betty. Thank you for that kind introduction, and happy birthday to the World Affairs Council, and happy Earth Day, everyone. I don't think we have a moment to lose. And let me start by actually disagreeing with one of my heroes, Jeffery Sachs, who is just up here in one way, which is that I actually think that we need a fundamental change in consumer behavior to be able to win this existential battle. I don't think this is just technological innovation alone that can take us to the other side. And the reason I say this is because that the world today is consuming every year on year, the consumption is going up, and there's something called the Earth Overshoot Day, which is the day when the Earth runs out of its kind of natural ecological resources, its replenishment rate, and so we are overusing the Earth's resources. And 30 years ago, only 30 years ago, Earth Day used to be October 30th. And today, Earth Day is just barely kind of going through August, so it's just going through 29th August or something like that. So in 30 years, so at this rate, we will be needing 3 planets worth of natural resources to support humanity in 2050 under the business as usual scenario. We are already using 1.6 planets worth. So we are essentially running a Ponzi scheme right now in terms of kind of resource usage. And if we do not change, and the reason we cannot be bystanders, to come back to your question in my HBR article, the reason we cannot be bystanders is that bystanders do not have the tenacity, they do not have the interest and the willingness and the ability to cut their coat according to their cloth, which is what we need to do as human beings. They don't understand why they shouldn't buy a new cell phone every year. So ownership, which is the concept that I propose in the HBR article, and by the way, this is also the topic of my follow-up book, Small Actions, Big Difference, which is predicated on the concept of ownership. So ownership essentially empowers us to do what it takes to be part of the planet and to be part of society. So I believe in the triple bottom line, which I say, planet, people, profit. We've got to take care of our planet. Otherwise, where will we go? We still don't have, habitation on Mars, whether people like our friend Elon Musk wants to or not. We just have this one planet Earth, and we have a growing population of human beings, many of whom are already marginalized and not included. So ownership is the psychological lens that actually can empower us to take actions in our respective spheres of influence. It could be to cut consumption, it could be to buy more knowledgeably, it could be to engage in innovation, it could be to engage in conversations with others and spreading the word, whatever it is it takes in our roles as employees, in our roles as consumers, in our roles as community members, in our roles as civil society members. So without all hands on deck, so the scenario that Professor Sachs was painting, and that's a very important scenario, that we need technology, so we need to go to net zero. But net zero, mind you, is only saying that you are kind of taking out carbon or hiding carbon in the natural atmospheric systems or artificial systems, whatever you build, to kind of ultimately say kind of we are not producing more carbon than there was pre-industrial revolution. It is not tackling the fundamental problem, underlying problem, which is kind of overconsumption that is at the root of this. And I think therefore ownership, and we haven't gone to the conditions of ownership, but for the conditions of ownership, we need empowerment, we need training, we need awareness, we need knowledge, and we need a culture where being sustainable is cool, being frugal is cool. So we need the opposite of what we have, which is like flashy cars and Kardashians and this and that. That's a mirage. That's not gonna take us where we want to go. Where we want to go, we will actually, I think we need to cut down on electric cars, believe it or not. I think we need a big shift to public transportation. So these concessions that human beings will need to make We need smaller houses in the United States. There is no way. So that's why ownership, I think, is fundamental. And for your viewers on the other side, I wish I had a copy of my book to show, but I'm traveling today, so I don't. But the book is called Small Actions, Big Difference. And all of this is kind of explained further there.
Great. Thank you for emphasizing that importance of ownership in the corporate community and also our ownership as individuals in society and the decisions we make every day as consumers. Divya, switching gears a bit here, you went to Antarctica in 2009 as part of the International Antarctic Treaty Expedition. You were the youngest Indian woman on record to ever visit the continent. As someone who discovered their passion for sustainability at a young age, what is your advice to other young people looking to engage meaningfully in the fight for sustainability on a large scale?
Thank you, Betty, for that kind introduction, and of course for this great question. And it's an honor to be here. Happy Earth Day, everyone. Lovely to share stage with Jeffery Sachs and Professor Bhattacharya. And I was nodding to everything what Professor Bhattacharya was saying, because I'm going to touch on those aspects as well, especially from what I've learned. So really, at the age of 22, I didn't know anything about climate change. At that point, I just watched the Inconvenient Truth movie and had probably been to like some events on environmental activism. So really, it was the start of trying to understand what is really happening to our planet. And I think where a lot of young people are coming from today is to understand what's really happening to the planet, because they hear a lot more doom and gloom in the news every single day. They are a bit disconnected from what's really happening in nature and what are the real solutions. I know it's taken me 10 years to come here and share that, but I think what young people need more than any time in history is to understand what is happening to our planet. So when I went in 2009 on my first expedition to Antarctica, I was able to connect the news that the Larsen B ice shelf had just broken away. And I could tell that we saw some chunks of icebergs floating away in the Antarctic Peninsula region. So we knew that climate change was actually happening. And when I went on the second time that I happened to go in 2018 is when 2017 is when the Larsen C ice shelf broke off. And so in that sense, over the period of 8 years, I was even able to experience climate change firsthand. I have experienced the ozone hole under Antarctica. And all this basically helped me to convert climate as a concept to the reality, and then connect it to ESG and sustainability and everything that we need to do in the real world to be able to address it through positive solutions. And I know it's been a process. Like I think you've mentioned that I worked at the city of Pittsburgh, and I helped as a part of the climate action plan drafting the third climate action plan for Pittsburgh. So what I learned there was that we need a holistic approach. So when you look at an entire city, you're not just looking at like the building efficiency, but also looking at the biodiversity and community resilience. You are covering all aspects of sustainability and looking at how the future can thrive together. And so more than any time, I think my recommendation to young people is to look at the solutions and follow the positive news, because that's something that I've had to intentionally and consciously work on to avoid the doom and gloom and to be able to choose the right solutions for myself in my everyday life, like carbon footprint management. And that's what I promote in a number of ways. I think if, technologies now that can really create so much change in our life. And I live in Asia, and I've lived and worked in Asia, where young people are use behavior very easily, right? Something that Professor Bhattacharya mentioned is the fact that Asia has so many ways that we can leapfrog technologies and use digitization and use certain aspects. Like, I heard about this new innovation that you can open Google Maps and actually check which is the most efficient route, right? With carbon emissions. And most people in Asia use bikes. So now the innovation is moving towards how we can make electronic bike rental available to different people in different parts of the continent. So those kind of ideas where you can combine new technological solutions with young consumer behavior is what's going to really make that shift towards net zero. And I think it's amazing that we have reached a point where we can say that, yes, the technological solutions exist. And now what we need is policy and consumer behavior to drive that change.
Let's go to that point on policy. And this is a question for both of you, as we're getting some questions from the audience. So we'll go to those next. So please submit your questions if you haven't had a chance to yet. But as a region with a vibrant industrial history, the emergence of Pittsburgh's Innovation District, and a strong commitment to sustainability, what role do you see that Pittsburgh plays in the climate innovation sphere? For either of you.
Sure, I'll go first. I think Pittsburgh plays a tremendously important role in the climate innovation sphere. So one of the projects that I have been closely involved in with the city of Pittsburgh, and in fact, Professor Sachs is also involved in that, is to create a Marshall Plan-like approach for Middle America, for the Appalachian region of our country, which is kind of Western PA, Ohio and West Virginia, Kentucky, these areas. And the Marshall Plan basically, was done, as some of you must be knowing this, in Europe post-World War II, to kind of rebuild Europe. Financing was made available. And here as well, we are asking the government to provide financing, which the Biden administration has already said that they will have this infrastructure plan. But the idea here is that this part of the country, I mean, if some of you have read Hillbilly Elegies, then you know that this part of the country, Appalachia, is stuck in kind of fossil fuel world, and stuck in their old ways, and they're reticent to change jobs. And only yesterday we read that they will change jobs if the right jobs come along, etc. But we need to kind of transform this Middle America into a green economy, from a brown economy to a green economy. Now, Pittsburgh is leading the charge there. So Mayor Peduto is really passionate about that part and creating that infrastructure. So it's very, very clear that even sitting in Pittsburgh and forgetting the city itself, but the fact that we are thinking about a broader region and taking, again, going back to the concept of ownership, taking ownership of transforming this entire region, I think speaks a lot to the fact that Pittsburgh wants to be a leader. If you look at Pittsburgh's sister cities or partner cities across the world in climate, places like Glasgow or Stockholm, these are leading lights in the climate arena. So we are learning a lot from those who know better, and we're coming back and we're implementing some of those things in our town. So there's a lot of good things going on here.
Great, thank you. Divya.
I'm gonna go back to 2017 when I was in the office. The day I think a comment was made by then President that I was chosen to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris. And I think that threw Pittsburgh into the global spotlight. And I remember reading while we were drafting the Climate Action Plan, Mayor Peduto already made 2030 goals. And today, President Biden announced that the U.S. Will target 50% emission reduction by 2030, but the mayor's 2030 goals, even back in 2017, already were looking at 50% reduction in emissions. So Pittsburgh has been leading the way. Pittsburgh has worked together with Paris and Edinburgh and a number of cities around the world in trying to create innovations. And I think also the eco district innovations and so many other kind of concepts that I got introduced to, especially while I was working as a fellow at the city, have been something that I have been able to take to different parts of the world as well. So really, I remember the building benchmarking ordinance that had just come out, where we were working with the Green Building Alliance on looking at how buildings can reduce emissions, because 80% of Pittsburgh's emissions were coming from buildings. And the same thing, as I now move to working in Asian cities, we're looking at solutions specifically on energy efficiency in buildings, sustainable cooling. And I think a lot of it comes from the US. It is always said that the absolute emissions of Asian countries is higher, but at the end of the day, the per capita emissions are lower. But we also don't know the positive news that even the reduction in emissions is coming much faster in the Western world because of the technology innovation there. And Asia is still playing catch up because there's policy lagging behind, and then so many other things lagging behind in our region. So I think there's so much opportunity for even Asian cities to learn from Pittsburgh especially. And I hope to be able to make that connection further in the next 10 years.
Excellent. One of the questions from the audience is, again, coming back to this behavior and corporations. Why should we as consumers and citizens distrust corporate-centered sustainability initiatives and pledges?
Pardon me, why should we distrust?
That's the question as it's framed.
Depends on the corporation, I would say. I don't think every corporation needs to be distrusted with equal, ferocity. What I would say is that authenticity is a big thing in the consumers, in the stakeholders' eyes and perception. So if a company does not provide any details on what it is going to actually do in terms of its plan, but it just says, we are big. We don't only think big, we do big. By 2040, we are going to conquer the world, yada, yada, yada. And does not share any plan of how it's going to get there, then yeah, you probably should not place too much stock in that. But if a company actually spells out kind of the roadmap of how to get from place A to place B, I don't think you should distrust their pledges. I mean, companies get a bad rap because I understand I think the public sentiment is that they are fundamentally about making money. And this has been true historically, at least in the last 50 years or so. But now that kind of, the writing is on the wall, even the Business Roundtable has come out and said that a company's purpose is not just to make profit, but to take care of all its stakeholders. So we are moving from a shareholder-centric kind of society or economy to a stakeholder-centric economy. And as more and more companies start realizing, and their leadership starts realizing that really that maybe we made money, by fooling people or pulling the wool over their eyes in yesteryears, we cannot do that anymore. And as more and more leaders who are in the audience, I imagine today, get into higher positions, they will become more authentic. So, I would not say blanketly don't trust any company. I would say look for signs of whether you should trust that company or not.
Sure. Who's walking the walk? Divya, I'll open that question to you as well, but I'm also going to add in another question that surfaced because you have spoken a lot to technology. And if you want to expand that point, one of the questions is, as we move to electrification, are there plans for holistic, environmentally acceptable methods for disposing of old batteries, solar panels, et cetera?
Right. Yeah, I think I completely agree about the fact that, not all companies can be trusted. In the past, there have been instances of greenwashing, which have been, caught about, especially because organizations want to use it more as a branding exercise. However, I think that is changing. I see that there is a positive trend in the space, especially companies are announcing their own climate targets. And I think because the bigger companies have already announced their major targets in the last 1 year, like Amazon, Google, I think the entire industry is shifting towards this. The entire ecosystem is shifting towards it. And if we do want to distrust the process in any way, I think it's if we probably want to look at it in a way that, okay, if we hold them accountable enough as customers and consumers, then probably they'll do even better. So I would say that, yes, have a little bit of distrust. I think it's healthy in a way, but it might push organizations to do even better, especially when it comes to how it treats its consumers. Coming to the other question, I think, yes, a lot of electrification is going to happen in the near future. Everything is going to be converted to electricity, digitization, everything is becoming smart. And in that sense, there's a lot more technology that has come out. And I think when it comes especially to batteries, there is, I think, an ethical question. It's also about recycling. Like, for decades, we thought, everything was getting recycled, but it's not. It's ending up in, different parts of the world. So there is a lot of research happening in the space, especially solar panels have become more and more efficient over the years. I have friends who are working in the solar panel efficiency space, and I understand that it's not moving as fast as we would like. However, there are holistic plans coming up. And I think as more organizations, especially like, for example, Amazon also announced that it is going to be powered by 100% renewable energy by the end of this decade. So for those kind of things, I think there is a strong push in the market now. And so technologies will move faster. There will be more investment made in R&D, especially to be able to adjust this. But also, I think a lot more countries especially are looking at using regulation to ensure that it is disposed safely. And I think a lot of waste was ending up especially in Asia. And now Asia is especially looking to become a strong leader. China is moving very forward and looking at how these technologies can be really be used in a way that's 100% efficient. And I think a lot of investment is going to go in the space. So we'll get there.
Great. Final question is on the importance of primary and secondary education. How can climate be part of the curriculum? To either of you.
It's a great question. And the short answer is it absolutely needs to be. And we have to keep pushing, I think, as parents, as educators, and whatever role we have in our society, we have to keep pushing our schools, our legislators, whoever we need to push to get it into the curriculum, to put it in the curriculum. I mean, I think a 5th grade child or a 6th grade child today should be able to understand the basics of climate. And my son is just graduating from high school. And when he did his physics and chemistry and biology, I was overwhelmed by the complexity of what he was studying, something he might not ever use in his life again. But there is no coverage of climate and its root causes, its impact. So I think we need to do everything possible in our capacity to make this a part of curriculum from primary school, from K through 12. It's never too early to start. And it's not just climate. I would like to make an appeal that inequality in society as well needs to be highlighted early on. And we need to learn to understand where our products come from and where our products go when they're disposed. Right now, all we are seeing is the advertising, the glittery part. We are not seeing the mines from where children are excavating things and that go into our digital devices. We are not seeing the oceans or the mass lands where waste is being disposed. Unless that whole value chain is exposed to all of us, including children, it's very, very hard for behavior to change. But we need those behavioral nudges.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you for both of you for your powerful remarks. I want to thank you again, all of our speakers, Jeff, Divya, CB. Really, we're again only scratching the surface on Earth Day, a conversation that needs to continue every day. We also want to thank the Center for Sustainable Business at the University of Pittsburgh and the World Affairs Council of America for co-hosting today's event, and for various councils across the US who have joined in as promotional partners today. So we know we have folks joining us from Columbus to Dallas, Fort Worth to Charlotte, who supported today's program. If you enjoyed our virtual program, please consider supporting the council by making a donation today. You can help us further our mission and continue our work providing community programming. Today's program was recorded as well, so all attendees will receive an email with a link to the recording, as well as resources, including CB's book and other items that were discussed today. So follow us on social media, stay connected on all that's going to be coming throughout the year as we celebrate our 90th and continue these important conversations. Thank you both again so much. Thank you everyone who joined us today. Until next time, happy Earth Day. Take good care.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Namaste.